Imagine sitting at the head of like this massive mahogany table in a high-stakes boardroom, right? You are managing a 9.6 billion raise energy grid.
Right.
And you're trying to explain a minor setback to your international investors. You look them dead in the eye and you say, we are operating under a massive deception.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. You meant to say you were dealing with a disappointment, but because of, just one linguistic slip.
One single false cognate.
Exactly. One false cognate, and you just confessed to corporate fraud. So, welcome to the unforgiving high-stakes world of executive English. We are coming to you live and direct through AcadFM, their premier audio broadcast from AcademiaBSB, which is an online English school with a truly unique approach to communication skills.
And today is Friday, April 10th, 2026.
It is indeed.
It is just a profound pleasure to be here on AcadFM. We are your Academia BSB teachers, and that scenario you just outlined, partner, that's exactly why we do what we do.
Totally.
I mean, we don't just teach vocabulary to help you pass some written exam. We teach you how to dominate that boardroom, right? How to negotiate billion-dollar contracts.
Yeah, and how to articulate really complex, highly technical ideas with unassailable precision. Our mission today is to provide a highly detailed analytical review session based entirely on your actual professional output.
And when my colleague says tailored, we mean like surgically precise. We are speaking directly to you, Lilian.
Yes, Mrs. Queiroz, you are our VIP third person in the room today.
Exactly. And if you are walking on that treadmill right now, which, by the way, I saw in your transcript that you optimize your time by listening to our broadcasts at the gym.
I deeply respect that efficiency hack, by the way.
It's brilliant. So keep walking. This deep dive is engineered specifically for you, drawn directly from your English conversations course.
Yeah, this is your personal linguistic audit, Lilian. Today, we're really focusing on the specific skills necessary to evolve within the upper echelons of the CEFRL.
That's the common European framework of reference for languages, for anyone wondering.
Right. We're examining your transition through the B1 level. And B1 is, well, it's notoriously referred to as the intermediate plateau.
It's a tough spot to be in.
It is. Because at this stage, you're no longer relying on just, basic survival English.
Right. You aren't just asking where the airport is anymore.
Exactly. The cognitive goal now is articulating nuanced, multi-layered corporate strategies and technical engineering concepts, specifically within your extremely demanding industry.
And well, let me stop right there because I want to look at the exact reality of that demanding industry. We are analyzing your latest class notes from students.AcademiaBSB.com.br.
We've scrutinized the PDFs, the grammar units, the reading exercises.
Everything. And most importantly, we have broken down the Google Meeting transcription, the GMT, from your April 7th class.
Aptly titled ACAD Business English Lesson-Lilian.
Right. And Professor, looking at the very first minutes of that April 7th transcript, I nearly had a corporate governance aneurysm.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Lilian mentioned she was having an exhausting day because she had 8 meetings. 8!
I mean, it is a monumental test of psychological and linguistic resilience, frankly. To transition into an English class after that requires just like immense mental fortitude.
Wait, I need to push back on the corporate culture aspect of this before we even touch the linguistic.
Oh boy, here comes the LinkedIn rant.
You know it. As someone who spends half my day analyzing corporate efficiency models, having 8 meetings in a single day it's a systemic operational failure.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a bottleneck.
It's a failure of asynchronous communication protocols. It means the project management office is using synchronous meetings as a crutch because they just don't know how to write proper documentation.
True.
I post about this exact lack of respect for deep work all the time. An 8-meeting day leaves 0 cognitive bandwidth for strategic execution. But okay, setting my governance frustrations aside.
Please do.
It did provide a massive opportunity for vocabulary expansion, didn't it?
It certainly provided the perfect context. During the class, our colleague provided Lilian with some vital synonyms to elevate how she reports this kind of operational bottleneck.
Right. So instead of defaulting to, I have 8 meetings.
You explored phrases like many meetings, multiple meetings, and, my personal recommendation for executive presence, a plethora of meetings.
Now, wait. Why plethora? I mean, is anyone really going to care if I say I had many meetings instead of a plethora? It feels a bit, I don't know, theatrical.
I get why you'd say that, but it's about signaling linguistic sophistication.
Yeah.
And controlling the narrative tone.
How so?
Well, when you say many, you're just stating a quantity. But when you use a word like plethora, which stems from late Latin and Greek origins meaning over fullness, you're subtly commanding the room's attention.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it shows you aren't just translating your thoughts directly from Portuguese. You're actively selecting high-tier English vocabulary to frame your exhaustion as, like, an abundance of responsibility.
That's a great way to look at it. It projects authority even when you are just completely burned out.
Exactly. It's the difference between sounding like a victim of your schedule and the master of it.
The transcript also showed a really great moment of real-time correction regarding basic operational reporting.
Oh, the dinner one.
Yes. Lilian, you initially said, I have a dinner, and then you were guided to shift that to the past simple, which is, I had dinner.
And that shift, while it seems minor, it's really the foundation of accurate professional reporting.
Right, because in Portuguese, it's pretty common to mix present tenses when telling a story about the recent past for, dramatic effect.
Yeah, to make it feel immediate.
Mhm.
But in English, especially in a corporate timeline, maintaining the integrity of the past simple is just critical for clarity.
Like saying, I worked all day long, or I came straight from work, or I had dinner.
Right. If an event is finished, the verb must reflect that finality, period.
Speaking of clarity, we absolutely cannot ignore the most terrifying phonetic trap in that entire transcript.
Oh, no.
Yeah. You were exhausted, Lilian, but you mentioned you still had energy for the class. But there was a slight mix-up in pronunciation. You accidentally referred to the English course as a curse.
Ouch.
Yep.
Yes, the phonetic difference between course, which is an educational program, and curse, which is a magical malediction or a terrible burden.
Our colleague actually joked about whether the English class was a burden in your life.
Which is funny in a safe classroom environment, Lilian. But, imagine making that mix-up in a multinational alignment call.
It would be disastrous.
Imagine writing a post on LinkedIn celebrating the completion of a corporate management course. I have actually seen a post completely ruined by that exact typo.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. The professional credibility just evaporates instantly, and the comment section becomes an absolute nightmare.
Which perfectly illustrates why precision just cannot be an afterthought.
Exactly. And that precision leads us directly into the heart of your corporate grind. Let's pull up the vocabulary from section 1.1 of your current class notes.
Let's do it.
So, Lilian, during that same discussion about your 8 meetings, you mentioned that they were of variable duration.
Right.
Now, Professor, look at that phrase, variable duration. Grammatically, it is flawless. But tell me how that sounds to a native executive's ear today.
Honestly, it sounds incredibly clinical. It sounds like you're reading from a technical manual or like a legal textbook from 1995.
Exactly.
While duration is perfectly valid English, in modern dynamic corporate environments, executives tend to prefer words that convey physical dimensions of time.
Yeah, they don't ask, what is the duration of the meeting?
Right, they ask, what is the length of the meeting?
Yes, variable length. It is sharper, it is more dynamic.
Duration sounds like we're measuring the half-life of a radioactive isotope or something.
Exactly. Length sounds like we are actively managing our calendar.
And the same principle of modernizing your vocabulary applies to the phrasal verb discussed in your notes, which is to give up.
Ah, yes. Lilian, you are actively steered away from using the word desist.
Now, desist is a classic false friend. It's a false cognate to the Portuguese word desister.
Yeah, if I am in a board meeting and the project manager tells me, hey, I desist from this initiative, I am going to assume I'm being sued.
Precisely. Desist is heavily restricted to legal jargon in modern English, like a cease and desist order.
Right.
If you use it in everyday project management, you sound archaic, like some 19th century litigator. Give up is the natural contemporary phrasing.
Like, we had to give up on the project.
Right. It's conversational but entirely professional.
Which brings us back to the ultimate hurdle for a B1 Brazilian Portuguese speaker trying to sound authoritative on an international conference call. False cognates.
The silent killers.
Let's return to the scenario I opened the broadcast with. Deception versus disappointed.
Right. Lilian, the Portuguese word decepção maps perfectly in your brain to a feeling of sadness when something goes wrong.
But in English, deception is an act of hiding the truth. It is deceit. It is fraud.
It is a critical, potentially career-ending error to avoid. I mean, if a vendor fails to deliver turbines on time, you are disappointed with their performance, yes. But if you say you uncovered a deception regarding the turbines, you are accusing the vendor of criminal fraud. The stakes of that vocabulary choice are just astronomical.
And the other false cognate from your notes is just as dangerous to team morale. Pretend versus intent.
Right. In Portuguese, pretender means to intend to do something. You have a goal.
But in English, pretend means to fake something. It's the act of acting like something is true when it is demonstrably false.
Like children pretend to be astronauts.
So if you tell your engineering team, I pretend to finish the compliance report by Friday, you are actively telling your team that you are going to fake the report.
You're announcing your own negligence.
It's terrifying how one misfired synapse in translating a cognate can derail your entire professional reputation.
It really is.
But, partner, looking further down Lilian's vocabulary list, we pivot from standard corporate speak to highly specific energy and mining terms.
Right. Words like ore, dam, sludge, homeless.
Now, why is it that technical jargon in the energy sector so often relies on words that look absolutely nothing like their Portuguese equivalents?
Well, it requires an understanding of linguistic history, really. The energy and mining sectors, particularly in the English-speaking world, have vocabularies that often stem from very old Germanic or Old English roots.
Because mining is such an ancient trade there, right?
Exactly. For instance, ore refers to the natural rock or sediment containing desirable minerals. That's minério in Portuguese.
Okay.
And dam is the physical barrier holding back water or waste, the represa or barragem. These short, punchy Germanic words have evolved on a completely different track than the Romance language terms you use in Brazil.
And when you mispronounce these punchy, compact words, the entire meaning collapses.
Completely.
Which means before we dive into the staggering statistics of AXIA Energy and how these terms apply to your actual job, Lilian, we need to pause our analysis of the boardroom.
We need to zero in on a phonetic trap we scraped directly from the transcription of your call.
Yes, we do. We are opening our first pedagogical pronunciation clinic right now.
All right, let us examine the mechanics of the M versus N sounds.
Oh, this is a big one.
Huge. From your transcription, Lilian, we isolated words you use like corruption, interruption, and conversation.
Right.
For speakers whose first language is Brazilian Portuguese, the hasacefan suffix is incredibly problematic. The natural instinct is to nasalize it, to make it sound like the Portuguese sum.
Right. It comes out sounding like an open, echoing vowel in the back of the nose. But in English, that suffix should sound like shan. It is flat and it's percussive. Interruption. Conversation.
And this leads us to a fundamental mechanical difference in how the mouth operates in English compared to Portuguese, specifically regarding the letters M and N at the end of words.
Which is so counterintuitive for Portuguese speakers.
It really is, because in Portuguese, if a word ends in M, like Poland or garagem, you don't actually close your lips. The sound is an open nasal vibration.
Not in English.
In English, ending a word with M requires a physical, decisive action. You must clamp your lips completely shut.
Let me push you on this, Professor. If I'm speaking fast in a negotiation, does clamping my lips really matter? Surely they understand the context.
Context will only save you so many times before the cognitive friction just exhausts your listener.
Fair point.
Let's look at the specific examples from Lilian's class to prove why it matters. The difference between man and ma'am.
Okay.
Man ends with an N. To produce an English N, your lips must stay open and the tip of your tongue presses against the alveolar ridge. That's the roof of your mouth just behind your front teeth. Man.
Right, I'm doing it now. Lips open, tongue up.
Exactly. But ma'am, which is a highly polite, formal term for a woman, short for madam, ends with an M, your tongue drops and your lips must press together tightly. Ma'am.
If you say yes, man, to a female executive instead of yes, ma'am, just because you didn't close your lips, you haven't just made a phonetic error. You have misgendered a stakeholder.
Exactly. That is a massive corporate faux pas. Another paired example we discussed is the kitchen item. A pan like a frying pan. It ends in N, lips open, tongue up, pan.
Pan.
Contrast that with the common name Pam, lips closed, Pam.
Yeah.
Or consider the star at the center of our solar system, the sun, spelled S-U-N, lips open. Contrast it with the word indicated a quantity, some, spelled S-O-M-E, lips closed.
Some. So Lilian, I want you to visualize this right now. If you are on the treadmill, I want you to literally exaggerate the movement.
Highly recommended.
Sun, tongue up, lips open. Now some. Clamp those lips shut. Pan. Pam. It will feel ridiculous and exaggerated in your living room or at the gym, but it is the absolute only way to overwrite decades of Portuguese phonetic habit in your neural pathways.
And creating those new neural pathways is vital when you are dealing with the sheer scale of operations that your company manages.
It really is.
So let's shift our focus to section 1.2 of your class notes, the vocabulary from your past class. But to truly understand why mastering words like asset and headquarters matters, we need to look at the hard data surrounding AXIA energy.
I love this part. I love when we back up our linguistic theory with hard corporate reality. So what is the actual scale of Lilian's communication environment?
According to the official press releases from AcadFM Energy's newsroom, Lilian, you are operating within a titan of infrastructure.
A titan. I like that.
In 2025 alone, AXIA invested a record 9.6 billion raise.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that is an 18% increase from their previous year's capital expenditure. And out of that massive budget, 6.1 billion raise was directed specifically laser-focused on the transmission segment.
6.1 billion raise. When you're managing budgets of that magnitude, your English cannot be survival level. You're dealing with international supply chains, global investors, massive risk management portfolios.
It is historic infrastructure expansion. They are actively expanding the grid by 2,261 kilometers of new transmission lines, targeted for completion by 2028.
That is massive.
Do you understand what that means for the Brazilian energy matrix? By 2028, AcadFM Energia will be responsible for handling 40% of the entire national interconnected system, the SI.
40%.
40% of the country's power routing through their assets. And from an engineering standpoint, they achieved a 100% renewable energy portfolio after strategically divesting and selling off their thermoelectric plants.
See, that strategic divestment is exactly the kind of aggressive ESG compliance that's environmental, social, and governance that makes a company a thought leader on the global stage. It is brilliant corporate governance.
It really is.
Now, Lilian, tie that mind-boggling scale back to your vocabulary exercises. Exercise 1 required you to distinguish between corporate roles.
The exercise contrasts employer and employee. The suffix is the key here.
Yeah.
The ER denotes the provider or the actor.
Right.
The employer is the entity providing the capital and the jobs, AXIA Energia. The EE suffix denotes the receiver of the action. The employee is the professional executing the work, that's you.
We also see this in interviewer, the person holding the authority and asking questions, versus the interviewee, the person in the hot seat answering them.
Exactly. And then we have headquarters versus branch.
Headquarters is a fascinating word. It functions as a singular concept, the main office, the central command center, even though it ends in an S.
Right. And the branch refers to the smaller, localized operations extending outwards from the center, much like the branches of a tree.
So connecting this to your reality, AXIA's headquarters is currently making strategic decisions regarding 224 large transmission projects.
Massive.
The employees across various regional branches are working tirelessly to maintain the company's massive 6.1 billion reais assets. The vocabulary perfectly maps to the corporate structure.
It really does. Let's move to exercise 2. This reveals a classic linguistic trap for Romance language speakers. The verb to attend.
Wait, let me stop you there, Professor, because this ruins so many status updates. If my Portuguese brain thinks of the word attender, I think of answering the phone or, like, serving a client at a desk.
And that is the trap. In English, to attend means to be physically or virtually present at an event or a gathering. It relates to attendance.
Right.
It does not mean to pay attention, and it does not mean to serve a customer.
Right. You attend a critical AXIA board meeting regarding the 2,261 kilometers of new lines, but you pay attention to the lead engineer during that meeting. You do not attend the engineer.
Precisely. The exercise also asks Lilian to contrast to clean and to wash. These are often conflated.
What's the main difference there?
The distinction lies in the method. Washing inherently requires a liquid, almost always water. You wash your hands. You wash a company fleet vehicle.
Okay, and cleaning.
Cleaning is the broader concept of removing dirt, dust, or clutter, which may or may not involve liquid. You clean your office desk by organizing papers. You don't wash it unless you are pouring a bucket of soapy water over your laptop.
Which I highly do not recommend for corporate efficiency.
No, definitely not.
And exercise 7 brings up an unholy trinity of false cognates that I have seen destroy international business presentations. Factory, fabric, and industry.
Oh, yes. Let's unpack these carefully.
Lilian, listen closely. A factory is the physical building. the brick-and-mortar facility where physical goods are manufactured using machinery.
Right.
Now, the Portuguese word fabrica sounds exactly like the English word fabric, but fabric in English means cloth. It's the woven material used to make clothes, like silk, cotton, or Kevlar. It's not building.
So if you tell a supplier that you want to visit their new fabric in São Paulo, they're going to think you want to look at textiles, not their manufacturing plant.
Exactly. And industry does not mean a single factory. It refers to the entire broad economic sector.
Right.
So to synthesize, 8x8 is a dominant titan in the energy industry. They might purchase massive transformers manufactured in an industrial factory. And you, Lilian, as a high-powered executive, wear tailored corporate clothing made of high-quality fabric.
That is a brilliant breakdown of the semantics. But semantics mean nothing if the phonetics betray you. Let's move into the pronunciation sections from your notes, starting with the past class.
Let's do it.
The transcription captured a specific list of words you struggled with. Asset, management, responsible, transmission, title, incredible, interesting, gin. Carefully.
I want to focus immediately on the word management. I hear this mispronounced in so many corporate Zoom calls, and it instantly makes the speaker sound hesitant.
It really does.
Brazilian speakers often want to pronounce the final E. They look at the word and say, management E. Lilian, English is a notoriously non-phonetic language. That final E, and frankly the E in the middle, are virtually silent. It is management. It is a tight, compact word.
We also need to address the phonetics of the G and J sounds, specifically comparing the words gym, spelled G-I-M, the athletic facility you frequent, and gin, spelled G-I-N, the distilled beverage.
Right.
Now, in Portuguese, the G followed by an I or Y often has a very soft, breathy, continuous friction, like the J in João.
But in English, how does that physical mechanism change?
It becomes an affricate. In English, the G in these specific words has a hard, percussive sound. It is almost explosive. Gym. Gin.
You really have to force it out.
Yes. Your tongue must physically block the airflow by tapping the alveolar ridge, building up pressure, and then releasing it with friction. It is a sharp, aggressive sound.
Moving to the pronunciation notes from your current class, we already covered the curse versus course disaster. Let's look at the word separate.
Ah, the stress issue.
Yes. Brazilian speakers often put the stress on the wrong syllable, saying CPA rate. Lilian, the power of the word is at the very beginning. Separate.
Then we have Southeastern, a geographic term you likely use constantly when discussing the SIN grid. This requires mastering the dreaded TH sound.
And why is the TH such a nightmare for Brazilian speakers, Professor?
Because the interdental fricative simply does not exist in the Portuguese phonetic inventory. Your brain has never had to tell your tongue to rest between your upper and lower teeth while blowing air. But if you substitute it with an F or an S, saying Southeastern or Sioux-Eastern, it immediately signals a lack of fluency. You must train the muscle. Tongue between the teeth. Southeastern.
The same stress rules apply to tragedy. It is not tragedy. The stress is on the first syllable. Tragedy.
And finally, victim, which brings us entirely full circle to the M versus N mechanics we just practiced.
Yes, you cannot say victim. You must close your lips tightly for that strong M victim.
We also have a semantic and phonetic trap noted here, at last versus at least. They look similar on a page, but they function entirely differently in a sentence.
Oh, this is a dangerous one in financial reporting.
Yes.
At last means finally, after a long, exhaustive wait. Like at last, the regulatory approval for the new transmission line came through. It expresses relief.
Right.
At least indicates a minimum acceptable amount or a silver lining.
Right.
We need at least 6 billion reais for this phase.
Or the timeline is delayed, but at least we secured the permits.
Mixing these up alters the entire emotional and financial reality of your report. I once saw a LinkedIn post where a project manager wrote, "At least we launched the product," instead of "at last."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Instead of sounding triumphant, it sounded like he was settling for bare minimum mediocrity. It sounded like he was saying, well, the product is terrible, but at least we launched it. The stakeholders were incredibly confused.
Which is why we dedicate so much time to these minute differences. And to ensure those differences are fully internalized, we are going to dive into another pedagogical phonetic clinic right now, focusing on two extremely stubborn habits.
From your transcription, Lilian, we isolated two specific hurdles that degrade executive presence. The first is the word rich, and the second is the word cooked.
Let's begin with the letter R in rich. In Brazilian Portuguese, an R at the beginning of a word, like in rato or rico, is produced in the throat with friction, sounding very much like an English H.
Right.
Consequently, Brazilian speakers often instinctively pronounce rich as hitch.
Which means instead of saying the company is wealthy, you are saying the company is a minor problem, a hitch in the plan.
Exactly.
And if they try to overcompensate and roll the R, it sounds like they're saying Reich, which carries entirely different, highly inappropriate historical connotations.
Right.
So how do we physically produce the correct English R?
You must completely alter the shape of your oral cavity. To pronounce the English R, the tip of your tongue pulls backward and curls slightly up toward the center of the roof of your mouth. But, crucially, it must never touch it.
It just hovers there?
Yes. The sound vibrates in the throat and resonates in the hollow space you've created. Rich, revenue, report.
Try it right now, Lilian. Curl the tongue back. Rich. Now, the second Zokas word, cooked. This deals with the dreaded ed ending of regular past tense verbs. Professor, why does this specific suffix cause so much chaos?
Because Portuguese is an intensely phonetic language. When a Brazilian speaker sees a vowel on a page, their brain demands that they vocalize it. So when they see C-O-O-K-E-D, their brain parses it as two distinct syllables. Cooked.
But the English language has zero respect for phonetics.
None whatsoever. The rule here is governed by the final consonant of the root word. The word cook ends with a voiceless K sound. Your vocal cords do not vibrate when you say K.
Right.
Because the K is voiceless, the ed suffix assimilates to that voicelessness. The E becomes entirely silent, and the D hardens into a sharp T sound.
So it is pronounced cook-teti-t. One single aggressive syllable. You didn't cook dinner, you cooked-tet dinner.
Exactly.
If you add that extra syllable, you disrupt the entire rhythm of the sentence, and native speakers will subconsciously focus on the error rather than the data you are presenting.
Mastery of these phonetic rules is what builds true fluency. Now, let us pivot to section 4 of your deep dive, use of language and grammar.
Sounds good.
Looking at your notes, we are reviewing some of the verbatim sentences you used to describe your day. You said, I worked all day long, I've just arrived, and I came straight from work.
Now, I have to praise you here, Lilian. These are spectacular, highly natural, idiomatic phrases. Saying I came straight from work, rather than a robotic coughing, I traveled directly from my office, shows a high level of linguistic comfort.
It really does.
But the transcript also shows you navigating a much more volatile corporate scenario, handling meeting interruptions.
Yes, maintaining authority when the flow of communication breaks down is a vital executive survival skill. The notes highlight several target phrases.
Let's contextualize this. We're going to run a brief role play so Lilian can hear how these phrases dictate the pacing of a room. I will act as a grumpy, highly caffeinated project director trying to lead an AXIA board meeting, and partner, you play the disruptive regional manager whose satellite Wi-Fi keeps failing.
I will channel my best technical difficulties. Ready.
All right, team. Looking at the Key 4 transmission infrastructure budget, we need to ensure the capital expenditure for the new substations is strictly aligned with...
Hey everyone, sorry my connection completely dropped. I'm back.
Right. Well, sorry for the interruption, everyone. Let's move on. As I was saying, the budget for the new Northeastern lines must account for...
Sorry, wait, where did we stop? The screen froze and I completely missed the last slide on the fiscal projections.
We stopped at the capital expenditure breakdown for the substations. Now, can we keep going? We have a massive amount of ground to cover before the hour is up.
Understood. Please proceed.
And scene. Now, Lilian, break down what just happened there. Those phrases, I'm back. Let's move on. Sorry for the interruption. Where did we stop? Can we keep going? They are not just polite filler.
They really aren't.
They're conversational steering wheels. When you ask, can we keep going, you aren't actually asking for permission. You are politely but firmly demanding that the room refocuses. Memorize them. They project immense confidence.
They absolutely do. Now, to project that confidence, the underlying structural engineering of your sentences must be sound. Let's examine the grammar section of your notes. We need to thoroughly dissect the present continuous versus the past continuous tenses.
Professor, explain the formula. How is this built?
The mathematical formula for any continuous tense in English is always the auxiliary verb to be plus the main verb adorned with an ing suffix. The continuous tense is utilized to emphasize the ongoing, unfinished nature of an action. It implies a process.
Okay.
So in the present, you conjugate the verb to be to match the subject. I am studying. This means right now, at this exact moment, the process of studying is active and unfinished.
And to move that entire concept into the past,
you simply alter the time state of the auxiliary verb. The main verb with the ing remains completely untouched. You change I am to I was. The sentence becomes, I was studying. It describes an action that was ongoing and in progress at a specific localized moment in the past.
But the grammar gets significantly more complex when we look at the simple present tense regarding spelling rules. Your notes mention something called the rule of the elephant. I love this conceptual framing.
Yes, the rule of the elephant is a mnemonic device. Lilian, when you are conjugating verbs for the third person singular he, she, it, or making nouns plural, and those words happen to end in the letters S, SH, SS, X, Z, or O, you cannot simply slap an S on the end. You must add the letters E, S.
And I want to push on the why here. Why does English demand this extra E? Is it just an arbitrary spelling rule created by 16th century monks?
No, it is driven entirely by physical phonetic necessity. Think about the sounds those letters make. S, SH, X, Z. They are sibilants. They produce hissing or buzzing sounds.
Right.
If you have the word church, which ends in a CH sound, and you try to add just an S, try it. Church S, it is a physical impossibility.
Yeah, you just kind of choke on the consonant.
Exactly. The human mouth cannot transition from a CH to an S without a vowel in between to reset the vocal tract. You need that E to create a brand new, distinct syllable. Therefore, church becomes churches. The verb to watch becomes watches. Go becomes goes. It is a mechanical requirement of human speech.
That makes total sense. It isn't just arbitrary grammar, it's acoustic physics. Now, let's look at another mental model from your notes. The octopus rule for formulating questions.
The octopus rule is a brilliant visual metaphor for the WH question words in English. Imagine an octopus reaching out its tentacles to grab highly specific pieces of information from the environment. Each WH word grasps a different category of reality.
Break down the tentacles for us.
If you use the word what, the tentacle is grasping for things, objects, or concepts. What is that turbine?
Okay.
If you use who, the tentacle is searching exclusively for people. Who is the lead engineer?
Right.
When is the tentacle reaching into time? When is the regulatory deadline? And where grasps for physical location or space? Where is the new dam located?
Now, during the class, Lillian, you had a slight mix-up utilizing your vocabulary in these structures. When asked what you were doing at 4 p.m., you replied, I was meeting my coworkers. Now, grammatically, that is completely correct. Meeting can function as a verb. However, our colleague corrected you. Why?
Because of corporate context. In standard, high-level corporate English, meeting is overwhelmingly utilized as a noun, an event you attend. You don't meet a meeting. And saying, I am meeting my coworkers sounds a bit casual, like you are grabbing coffee with them at a cafe.
Right. The precise professional phrasing to describe that block on your calendar is, I was attending a meeting with my coworkers. It sounds infinitely more structured.
Yes, it does.
Another quick correction we pulled from the transcript. When formulating a negative future construction, you attempted to say, no, I aren't.
This is a matter of subject-verb agreement. Remember the core conjugation of the verb to be. The first person singular is I am. Therefore, the negative must simply be no, I am not. You cannot mix the first person I with the plural or second person verb form are.
And finally, rounding out the grammar section, Unit 94 of your PDF covered ordinal numbers. This is not just trivia, Lillian. This is the backbone of financial reporting and timeline management. In English, you do not say October 4. You use the ordinal, the 4th of October. First, second, third, fourth.
This ordinal structure also dictates how we speak about fractions, which, given that you work with complex engineering and budgetary reports, you use constantly. The top number is a cardinal number, but the bottom number is ordinal.
Give me an example.
So 1/4 is spoken as 1/4 or 1/4. 2/3 is spoken as 2/3, pluralizing the ordinal.
It also applies to historical or sovereign titles. If you are referencing monarchs in a historical context, you use the ordinal. It is Queen Elizabeth II or King Henry VIII.
Now, Lillian, why do we analyze all of this? The elephant rule, the octopus tentacles, the continuous formulas, the fractions. We analyze the why behind the rules to build what linguists call automatism.
Automatism. Explain that concept to Lillian, because I think it is the key to surviving the B1 plateau.
Automatism is the neurological state where a rule becomes an involuntary reflex. When you are in the middle of a high-pressure negotiation regarding a $6 billion race infrastructure project, you do not have the cognitive bandwidth to consciously visualize grammar tables.
No, absolutely not.
You cannot pause to remember if church takes an ES. These rules must become automatic. A teacher correcting you is not a crutch for you to lean on. These structural rules are a launch pad designed to propel you into independent, unthinking fluency. You forge these pathways through relentless repetition until the brain no longer has to translate from Portuguese.
A launch pad, not a crutch. I absolutely love that framing. And you're going to need every ounce of that analytical launchpad as we move into the heaviest, most complex, and frankly most somber part of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
Section 5, the reading analysis.
Yes. We are analyzing the provided text titled Brumadinho Natural Political Disaster. Now, before we unpack this, a crucial editorial reminder to our listeners. The text contains highly specific quotes, theories, and viewpoints from anthropologists and environmentalists regarding the political and institutional frameworks in Brazil.
Very important disclaimer here.
Yes. We are reporting these viewpoints strictly as they appear in the source text for the purpose of language analysis and to understand the vocabulary of industry risk. We are impartially analyzing the text. We are not endorsing any specific political stance or legal conclusion.
Absolutely. Our focus is strictly on the English comprehension and the corporate realities described by the authors. And the text lays out some incredibly grim details. It highlights a staggering statistic. A mere 1,177 days separated the catastrophic collapse of the Fundão Dam in Mariana and the collapse of the Corrego do Feijão Dam in Brumadinho. At the time of the article's writing, the Brumadinho collapse had left 65 dead and 280 individuals missing.
From a structural engineering and infrastructure perspective, the details provided in the text are chilling. The dam in Brumadinho was originally constructed in 1976 using a specific engineering method called upstream upheaval in Portuguese. This is known as altamento a montante.
Now, Professor, explain that to me like I am not a civil engineer. How exactly does an upstream upheaval dam work? Because the text makes it sound inherently precarious.
It is. According to the engineering experts cited in the text, the upstream method essentially uses the tailings, the actual mud, sludge, and waste output of the mining process itself, to build the walls of the dam progressively higher in stepped layers over time.
Wait, so instead of building a separate secure concrete wall, you were using the dried waste to contain the wet waste.
Exactly.
The text notes that this method is widely considered outdated, obsolete, and the least safe structural option available globally. Yet, historically, it was the standard. Why? Why would anyone build a dam out of its own waste?
Economics. It is by far the cheapest method of containment. You don't have to transport external building materials. Leonardo Ivo, an environment observer cited heavily in the reading, points out that alternative, much safer technologies absolutely exist, specifically something called dry containment or dry stacking implemento a secco.
Now, this is where the corporate compliance aspect fascinates me. Ivo argues that companies willingly take the risk of using upstream upheaval purely for economic margins. However, the studies cited in the text show that adopting dry treatment technology would only increase operational costs by about 20%.
That is the crux of the engineering economics debate. In the grand scheme of multi-billion-dollar mining operations, a 20% infrastructure cost increase is highly plausible to avoid the total catastrophic failure of the asset and the resulting loss of life.
Let's take a strict corporate governance perspective on this, Lilian, because this is where the language meets your daily reality. What we are reading about in this text is the ultimate catastrophic failure of ESG environmental, social, and governance compliance. In today's market, you cannot survive without robust ESG frameworks. Cheap in 1976 translates to a multi-billion-dollar company-ending liability in 2026.
The contrast with modern infrastructure management is stark. Look at what your company, AXIA Energia, is doing. AXIA is managing a modern 100% renewable grid. They just invested 4.8 billion reais specifically in reinforcements and improvements to ensure the reliability of the national interconnected system. That is modern engineering prioritizing safety, resilience, and systemic redundancy.
Exactly. Modern companies understand that the 20% cost increase is basically an insurance policy on your social license to operate. Now, the reading also quotes anthropologist Andrea Zuri. She argues that these events should not be classified as natural disasters, but rather as political institutional failures. She claims that economic imperatives have been placed entirely too far ahead of human life and environmental stewardship, criticizing the historical loosening of legislations in favor of mining conglomerates.
Furthermore, environmentalist Maria Delce Ricas is quoted in the text referring to these aging upstream dams as literal time bombs that can explode at any moment. The vocabulary used here by the researchers, toxic sludge, tailings, upstream method, institutional failure, this is the vocabulary of extreme risk management.
And the financial markets, international investors, and global regulatory bodies simply will no longer tolerate the operational time bombs described by Ricas. If an international auditor reads a report that a company is operating an upstream dam, the investment capital dries up instantly. Modern energy and mining companies must prioritize absolute transparency to survive.
Which brings us to the most critical semantic distinction in the entire text. The vocabulary of risk must be precise. We are going to pause our analysis of the Brumadinho text to run our third and final pedagogical phonetic clinic, focusing on the terminology of environmental impact.
During your class, Lillian, there was a specific, highly detailed discussion defining two terms: mud versus sludge. If you were writing a risk assessment report, mixing these two up is a dereliction of duty. Let's break them down. Mud is simple. It is a natural occurrence. It is a mixture of earth and water. Llama. If it rains heavily in your garden, you get mud. It is dirty, but it is benign.
Sludge, however, is a profoundly industrial term. In the context of the mining sector and tailings dams, sludge, translated as rejeto, is highly toxic. It is a dangerous, chemically altered mixture containing earth, water, crushed concrete, uprooted trees, toxic chemicals, and heavy metal mining waste. When a tailings dam collapses, it is not mud that destroys the valley below. It is a wave of toxic sludge.
If you are in a legal deposition or an investor briefing and you refer to the containment breach as mud, you are actively minimizing the chemical and physical reality of the disaster. You must use the word sludge. And phonetically, Professor, how do we master this word? Because that ending is tricky.
It requires mastering the soft J sound at the end of the word, S-L-U-D-G-E. Brazilian speakers often want to add a vowel at the end and say sludgy, but the E is completely silent. The word must end with that soft, buzzing friction. Your tongue taps the roof of your mouth and releases the air slowly. Sludge.
Sludge, exactly. Do not add the E. It strips the word of its harsh industrial impact. And with that, we are entering the final stretch of our deep dive today, your CEFRL B1 performance evaluation, and our final thoughts on your trajectory.
Looking comprehensively at the transcripts, the grammar exercises, and your engagement with incredibly dense texts like the Brumadinho reading, Lillian, your progression is evident. We must commend your brilliant time optimization. Listening to your class podcast 3 times while at the gym is the exact kind of relentless synergy that drives professional success.
Integrating learning into your daily routine is the hallmark of a high-performing executive. It proves you understand that language acquisition isn't a hobby. It is a core professional competency. But we also must acknowledge why you have to listen 3 times. It is because the B1 level is famously, notoriously challenging.
It is the hardest phase of language learning. At A1 and A2, every new word feels like a massive victory. But at B1, you have enough vocabulary to survive daily interactions, but you lack the nuance to express your true intellect. The massive challenge right now is breaking the habit of direct, literal translation from Portuguese in your head before you speak.
Right. When you translate literally, you end up saying, "I have a deception," instead of "I'm disappointed." You are fighting against the deep neurological wiring of your native language.
Exactly. You are trying to build that automatism we discussed during the grammar segment. You need to reach a state of fluency where you don't think about the rule of the elephant or the octopus rule before you open your mouth. You just naturally formulate the continuous tenses correctly because the physical pathways in your brain have been forged through sheer repetition. Listening to the podcast 3 times is exactly how you forge those pathways.
And Lillian, you absolutely knew a but was coming from me. As your grumpy, compliance-obsessed corporate efficiency teacher, I have to affectionately remind you that Academia BSB operates on a strict, proven methodology. Motivation is fantastic. Gym listening is fantastic. But you must do your sit-down, deep work homework.
The active application phase.
Exactly. The notes specify your homework clearly. Read the full Brumadinho text independently with no distractions and answer the written comprehension questions. You must practice the physical act of writing out these complex ideas. Do not make me write a viral, highly critical LinkedIn post about a lack of corporate compliance in student homework, Lillian. I will tag you.
She is joking.
Yeah.
Mostly. But the homework truly is the application phase of the automatism process. It takes the passive knowledge you absorb while walking on the treadmill and turns it into active, usable executive skill. It solidifies everything we have unpacked today.
Which brings us to the close of this incredibly detailed, expansive deep dive. Lillian, we know the reality of your schedule. You are putting in grueling hours, navigating 8 meetings a day, managing variable lengths and durations, dealing with massive infrastructure concepts, and still showing up with the energy to master complex English grammatical structures. It is genuinely impressive.
It is. And to tie this entire episode together, I want to reflect on the prominent voices in the reading source we analyzed today. Throughout the Brumadinho text, the leading voices of analysis and accountability were women. Both anthropologist Andrea Zuri and environmentalist Maria Delcheriquez are female leaders holding massive historical industries accountable to the public. They are driving the scientific, environmental, and institutional research required to prevent future tragedies.
It perfectly highlights how vital female voices are in the highest levels of the professional sphere. Whether it is academic researchers holding mining conglomerates accountable or female corporate leaders like you, Lilian, working within modern titans like AcadFM Energy to fundamentally reshape the ethics, infrastructure, and safety of the global energy sector. You are part of that profound systemic change, and you are learning how to communicate the future of that sector on a global stage.
Thank you for your relentless hard work, Lilian. Keep building those automatic pathways. Keep mastering the vocabulary of your industry.
And never forget why we push you so hard on the phonetics, the grammar, and the corporate nuances. Because as we say here every single day, say it with me, partner.
It is not only about the language.
It is all about communication.